right, for this week's Kid of the Week, Vito, you got to interview Wynn recently. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Wynn, Wondrous Brewing in Emeryville. He gave us the recipe for the Creek Park IPA, which is one of their flagship IPAs. It's delicious. The interview was awesome. Go check it out. We got a show called The Mashup, which I host. Like, comment, let us know about it. Check that out. It's awesome.
Awesome. And for those of you who don't know, before you watch it, Wynn worked with us. We've had his beer over the years and it's fantastic.
It's an amazing brewer. Yeah, check it out.
Let's talk about this specific one, Creek Park. So let's go into the ingredients on this.
Sure.
Like grist, hops, yeast. I think we know, Kyle.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, luckily for all homebrewers out there, it's not too complex of a recipe, which is awesome. I feel like simple recipes, it's simple beer. It's just like it's cohesive. It just works out. You know, it's clean. Yeah. So Creek Park stands for Walnut Creek Skate Park. I remember the first time I actually really sat down and drank a beer was on the Creek Park bench. So there's these little barbecue benches right outside of the skate park, and so the logo for Creek Park is that bench, and that bench was the first time I ever experienced beer in a really just classic, mature, awesome, great way, and just learned so many things at Creek Park as well, just kind of skateboarding and everything. So we always try to push ourselves with that beer. It's always the recipe always stayed the same, just finding different qualities of hops and just putting putting the best lots and everything into that beer is always a super fun thing.
So to win the kit, go to morebeer.com/free beer Friday and enter the weekly giveaway.
Awesome. So this week we're giving away the Creek Park from Wondrous Brewing. It's a West Coast IPA. Let us know in the comments what your favorite West Coast IPA is, or another IPA.
Okay, a few weeks ago in the weekly survey, we asked you to tell us some things you wanted us to give away, things you wanted us to talk about, and that's really helped us develop the next few months worth of programming, which was awesome. So thank you, and always ask your questions in the comments and we'll be sure to get them in the roadmap. But part of that, I thought it'd be fun to have Vito come and help me answer some of these questions. So let's get into it.
What do you see as the next trend or current trends in homebrewing?
Great question. For me, the current trends or next trends are enzymes, genetically modified yeast, hop products, things like that are really pushing the science. And we kind of went into that in one of the mashup episodes, which you should go check out with Bear Bottle. We talked about that. So for me, I think that's the next trends, those specific ingredients that are going to enhance aromas, flavors, things like that.
Are you sure it's not cold IPAs?
It might be cold IPAs.
So I think the next trends in homebrewing are going to be continuous innovation, which is going to lead to us continuously being more like a professional brew house, having the tools and the abilities to do things closed, to do things affordably, and to do them the right way. I think we're just going to continuously go that way. And then I think the other thing is, I'm hoping for a lot of people, it becomes simpler, more enjoyable, something they do because it's truly fun. We can always buy beer. It's everywhere nowadays. Great examples of it in every neighborhood, but it's a ton of fun to make it. But if you make it complicated, sometimes that takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, have fun, main thing.
I've done extract kits before. I'd like to try all grain kits. What equipment would I have to invest in? And basically, how is it done?
That's a great question. And I'm just gonna go back to how I made that step, and it was what they call a mini mash. And More Beer at the time was selling a mini mash kit, which was essentially a bucket with what do you call it? A
bag.
Bag, thank you. So you were able to do a mash within that bucket, add some hot water, just kind of get you the practice of doing that.
I love those kits too, because you were doing a kind of half mash, half extract. In fact, it wasn't even half. It was more like a quarter mash and the rest extract, just to get you trained. But essentially, all you need is something that you can do the mash in, and a bag still serves that purpose. Vito's got a great article for Brew in a Bag that you can check out on our website. And in fact, if you watch any of our videos of the Brewzilla, that's essentially a very large and expensive brew in a bag system. But essentially you need one kettle, a bag that can fit all your grains, and the liquid that you're going to mash in, and then you remove that and you boil it just like you would your extract.
Why would I want to know the pH of my mash? How is the pH going to affect my final product? What are ways to adjust the pH if it isn't quite right?
Great question. Well, let's start with the first of why pH is important during the mash. What's happening there is a conversion from starches to sugars, and what there is they call the brewer's window. It's like 5.2 to 5.4 pH is when you get the best conversion. So keeping it in that area is what you're trying to do. Second part of the question of how to affect that, you've got a couple ways. Phosphoric acid doesn't really impart any flavor, but you could drop the pH. Lactic acid, you'll get a slight little bit of flavor change, but you could drop the pH. And then there's also acidulated malt, which is just Pilsner malt with lactic acid on there.
I'll add to that. Other ways you can look at is there's a product called 5.2. It's bound with salts, so you're going to get a little bit of salt, like he talked about with the lactic, getting a little bit of character difference. But then the other thing is certain grains, darker ones, so stouts, porters, and the like, will also help you bring down that acidity level. But that's what we're always doing, is we're always lowering. We're almost never having to raise it up.
Yeah, most groundwater is about 7 pH. If you're brewing a stout or something like that, you generally don't even need to adjust it, because of the dark malts will bring it down. If you're doing something light like a blonde or even an IPA for that matter.
Beers.
Yeah, most beers, everything other than dark beers.
Yeah, and then let's talk about it. So you have for the mash itself, but then the fermentation, it's important, and it changes.
That changes the pH as well, yeah. Through the boil, you're gonna drop a little, and then after fermentation, you're also gonna drop a little as well. Most finished beers around 4.8, 4.7 pH.
Mixed fermentation question. Do you pitch sac yeast first and let it ferment out, then pitch a lactic acid producing bacteria after in secondary?
Great question, and I've done both. You can do both. Things like the Rosalera blend from I believe it's White Labs or Y Yeast, has sac and lactobacillus and Brettanomyces cultures all in one pack, in which case obviously you'd co-pitch. Having done both, and done both, commercially I've done the latter route, which is ferment clean with a Saison yeast. I love a French Saison, Belgian Saison works as well. What you're gonna wanna do in that case is mash a little higher to create more dextrins, and that the Brettanomyces will chomp on that over time. So I like the flavor you get from a clean, and then moving it into a barrel or putting it into a secondary vessel. The advantage of that too is you're getting it off that yeast cake. So if you're going to try and sour with a co-pitch, it's going to take 6 to 8 months, maybe 4 months if you're lucky, to sit on the yeast for that long. You're going to start to get some metallysis, which is going to give you some just off flavors. Like I said, they're both great, but for my money, I'd go with the clean ferment and then pitch the bugs secondary.
Like anything we do on this show, take it all with a grain of salt. The owner of White Labs always used to answer every question with, it depends. And that's how all these answers really are, because I'm listening to Vito talk and I agree with him. I think if you want control and repeatability, you're best off doing your standard fermentation first, then adding bugs, because you can control that. You had your bugs up front, the growth of those bugs, the colony of that pitch is going to be probably slightly different all the time, and thusly giving you different flavors. Maybe not a bad thing. Some of those blended yeasts are delicious. And so especially for homebrew, some of the farmhouse reds have been my favorite that way. So like I said, take all of these with a grain of salt. We might change our minds 2 weeks later.
To that point too, I think for me, especially for sours, the art of it is in the blending. So use that opportunity to have some fun with it. Go ahead. What I like to do when I'm brewing, I'd like to usually do it it's seasonal. So in the wintertime, I'll brew like 20, 30 gallons of wort, split them up into different carboys, and do one way, do another, and then you'll have all that liquid to blend on the back end. We have a great article on our website that I wrote about sour beers. Check that out. It goes into everything we just talked about.
Wait, you couldn't have just answered the question with that?
I know.
Can you cover aging with fruit or brewing with fruit flavoring?
Yeah. We've got a great article on that. Check that out. But I'll get into it real quickly. So there's a couple ways to go brew with fruit. It's always done, after fermentation. Never, you don't want to put it on the boil side. Generally not. So there's a couple ways. Freezing fruit is a great way to start because it breaks down the cell walls of the fruit and allows that wort to kind of extract. So that's a great one. Also, if you're working with fresh fruit, you could pasteurize it yourself, and this works great to bring out flavors. I always say it's jammy. It gets a really good jammy taste. So you want to stir it constantly, get it up to about 160, 170 degrees, then cool it back down and add it to your wort. And then there's also just regular, fresh fruit, just adding it right in. If you're doing like a sour beer or lambic, something like that, that works great as well.
Yeah, so typically some key things to note, you usually want to de-stone, de-seed, anything like that, the fruit. So some people don't know that, so I think it's good that we point out. And I just want to talk about fruit in 3 buckets because a great customer of ours did this awesome experiment, took 20 gallons, broke it into 4 carboys, and did one with no fruit, one with fruit flavoring, one with puree fruit, and one with fresh fruit. I think that was frozen, if I remember right. All the same fruit. And then had them go through fermentation as they always were, and then bottled them up and did a blind tasting, told us what he had done, and so we had to choose. And I think this is, the reason I'm getting to this point is if you want the intense fruit flavor, that's what fruit flavorings are for. So the one that was from fruit extract, the liquid kind, it tasted, I think it was raspberry, if I remember right, tasted just like raspberries. I mean, not my favorite, to be brutally honest, but those scientists who make these flavorings know what they're doing. Then the next one was made out of puree in raspberries. The key thing is there, when they puree it, they also get the seeds out. And that was a huge flavor differentiator. The other thing is, and Vito mentioned it, kind of they pasteurized that and when making it, and it definitely had deep, rich flavor and tasted a lot like raspberry. But when you ferment off those sugars, you take away that certain flavors of that raspberry, but super good. Probably my favorite. The fresh fruit, again, raspberry, so it's a tougher one than some fruits, but had all the seeds in there, not in the final product, but in what he fermented. And definitely had a little bit of bitterness to it because of that. And I think it was the most fermented. He said it had the lower of the 2 final gravities because all that fructose is just so available to the yeast. So that's the one thing I think a lot of people don't get about fruit, is that fruit is highly, highly, highly fermentable. So a lot of times when you take away the sugars, that fruit doesn't always taste like what they were going for. So sometimes you back sweeten it, like kill the yeast off and back sweeten with fruit.
That's what I was going to mention, yeah.
Or use a little bit of, some people do a hybrid. They use fresh fruit and a little flavoring afterwards to get that back. So it's all personal, no right answer, but those are some things to consider. Thanks for watching. See you next Friday. Cheers.